For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to our signature show, The Gist, on Strat News Global. Our guest this evening is Mr. Mahesh Sachdev. He was our ambassador in Algeria and Nigeria, High Commissioner in Nigeria. He was also an ambassador in Norway. He's an Arabist, speaks Arabic fluently, and closely follows developments in Africa. Ambassador Sachdev, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Our focus this evening is on Monday's coup in Sudan. Can you play the Sudan graphic right now? We have a map of Sudan coming up. And what do we know so far? That a state of emergency has been declared. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is under arrest. The transitional government he heads has been dissolved by the army. And a roadmap for 2023 elections remains unchanged, although the army is firmly in charge and therefore all the doubts. Now, General Burhan, the army chief, claims that infighting among various factions within the transitional civilian government is the reason why the army has stepped in. He feared instability and so on. So, Ambassador Sachdev, what do you make of this explanation? Is it convincing? Is it credible?
It's partially so. There were repeated demonstrations for the transitional government and against the transitional government for nearly a month now. Khartoum has been partially paralyzed by these demonstrations for competing interests. Some wanted military to take over fully. Some other wanted civilian administration to be in charge and military go back to barracks. Sudan has had a long-standing tradition since its independence in 1956 of having military government.
Yeah.
In, let's say, 65 odd years, the civilian governments have been in charge only for 10 years. Rest of the time, Sudan has been governed by military governments. So there is a history dicing against the civilian governments. Second issue that has come to fore is economic depravity. The economy, never a strong point in Sudan, has been doing worse after South Sudan seceded with all the oil revenues, and the mismanagement by the government, kleptocracy, etc., has also denuded the economy. It's a big country. It's not a small population, 40 million, and it has its strengths. Nile River gives it fertility of soil. There are minerals to be explored. People are generally better educated than average in Africa. There are professionals, etc. But these professionals have reasons to feel dissatisfied. And they are among those who are clamoring for full democracy. I think that is where the fulcrum lies. It's moving all the time.
So at this point, can the international community do very much? I know the UN has condemned it. The African Union may suspend it because of the coup. But what else can the international community do? Are they interested enough?
I think the opportunity cost of Sudan returning after long isolation imposed on it during al-Bashir era has that opportunity cost may go up. It was this return to IMF, World Bank 3 months ago. It was when the World Bank president visited Sudan. It was also a re-entry of Paris Club of debtors, agreeing to reschedule Sudan's considerable debts unpaid for decades. That was going to be the, the driver of optimism for future. Now, with aid from United States numbering something like $700 million suspended, EU talking tough, major donors not sort of taking kindly to this move of which is effectively a coup d'etat, even though um, General Burhan has said that it's not a coup d'etat. Uh, so all that puts a mark of uncertainty over the future of Sudan's engagement with uh, global community. It has its friends in the Gulf countries. There are expatriates sending remittances to their families, which sustain the economy to some extent. But it's all driven by expectance of normalization of Sudan's ties with the West and with the public at large. Its relationship with Israel was uh, a harbinger of better times to come as well. That would depend, that sort of lubricated the return of with the United States to normalcy, which were suspended, if you remember, by Osama bin Laden being in Sudan when in 90s when U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya were bombed, leading to sanctions and suspension of Sudan from IMF and World Bank, etc., and progressive isolation that lasted for near over 2 decades. So that seemed to be open to question at this stage, and that is the leverage in West in general and international West in particular and international community in general may use to ensure that this coup d'etat is reversed. I should also add that African Union has a long-standing tradition of not recognizing military coups, and that may come handy when African Union this if and when African Union, IGAD, and other organizations in the region decide to play tough. But a lot would depend on how the domestic situation pans out.
What about regional neighbors like Ethiopia and Egypt? You think they're okay with this kind of coup? Does it add to the general instabilities prevailing there?
Well, Sudan, that's an important question, and I don't think anyone has answers because the situation is evolving. Sudanese chaff at being treated as kid brother by Egypt, which is much bigger country and economy and shares the Nile River with Sudan. Its relations with Ethiopia are not on the even keel, partly because of the, the Renaissance Dam that Ethiopia has put on White Nile, and that may curtail the flow of water, particularly in lean season, and that jeopardizing Sudanese agriculture and other economic offshoots. Secondly, the Tigray province in Ethiopia is facing an insurrection, and a large number of refugees have landed up in Sudan. There is also a simmering border dispute which is becoming hotter. So these two issues with Sudan, between Sudan and Ethiopia may see some evolution, although the Sudanese coup d'etat of October 25th is basically driven by domestic issues, and
Yeah.
therefore it may be in General Burhan's interest, firstly, to keep the neighborhood pacified, or if the situation gets out of hand, use the external bogey, foreign hand, and border issues may be precipitated one way or the other. Sudan and Egypt uh, have a love hate relationship, as I mentioned, but then many Sudanese demonstrating against the military regime find similarities in the pattern of the military coup.
Yeah.
It doesn't help that the first names of the two military leaders are both Abdul Fattah al-Sisi and Abdul Fattah al-Burhan. So the slogan in 2019, when long-standing dictator Omar al-Bashir was toppled, was that either our way or Egyptian way.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of convergence between the uh, two military strongmen, and that may also make the opposition converge. So Egyptian government under military leader Abdul Fattah Sisi has been able to basically remove the political opposition from reckoning, but Sudanese Abdul Fattah is going to have to deal with them now.
Is there an Islamist context to this coup? Is there a threat or a fear that the Islamists who are all over the Sahel could be building pockets of influence in Sudan? Is that an issue?
Well, we would have to wait and see. Uh, I should add that ever since British rule in 19th century, uh, the Islamists under Mehdi, Clan, and others have emerged as the front line of nationalism in Sudan. They have a reasonably clean image even after independence, and Al Mahdi clan and others have periodically articulated the Sudanese people's aspirations. They, then again, we also had the time, as I mentioned before, in 1990s, after um, Russians left Afghanistan, and Pakistan and Afghanistan had become too hot for Al Qaeda. Uh, Osama bin Laden had shifted to Sudan,
Yeah.
where from where he was ousted as well, returning to Tora Bora in Afghanistan in late 1990s, before the September 11 attack in 2001. So that issue is also there. Sudanese population is overwhelmingly Sunni, is Muslims, and there are pockets of organized Muslim Brotherhood and other type of outfits, and possibility of Al Qaeda or Al Shabaab kind of groups being there, or even Islamic State making inroads from neighboring Libya and Egypt may not be ruled out forever if this uh, unsettlement continues.
What would you see as general? Burhan's major challenge at this point domestically? There are reports of violence in the streets. Beyond that, what is his challenge?
I think he faces considerable difficulties. He would have inherited uh, this transitional government and sovereignty council's mandate, which had a tough job. First of all, the uncharted political waters. Uh, how does one return to democracy? Uh, what kind of democracy is it going to be? Whether it's going to be constitutional democracy with military going back to barracks, or whether it will be Egypt type of democracy where military continues to be in the presidential palace, but a semblance of civilian order is allowed to take over under guided elections, as in Egypt, uh, needs to be charted out. He has to meet the twin objectives of uh, pacifying the domestic population and reassuring the international community that the democracy has been effectively restored. Secondly, I think the economy is in a mess, uh, and that would need correction over a medium to long term. Now, military governments in Africa have slightly better record than the civilian government in ensuring that the reforms for economic purposes are carried out and are implemented properly. So that may be a plus, mildly speaking, if other issues are taken care of. Thirdly, we would also need to look at various hotspots and rebel movements in Sudan. Darfur has been on in a difficult place, insurgency wise, and strong arm tactics have not succeeded in suppressing the insurrection. It's been going on for over 20 years now. There are also other minor insurrections which may acquire bigger shape and engage military in Blue Nile province, in Kordofan, and Darfur, as I have already said. Eastern Sudan on the Red Sea shore has recently had some tribal uh, strikes, etc. And Port Khartoum, the biggest Port Sudan, I'm sorry, the biggest port of Sudan, has been immobilized, leading to pile up of goods and worsening the economic situation and making prices go even higher of essential commodities. So, all that would need fullest attention. And military, which has ruled till 2019 for 30 years under al Bashir, is has both the experience but also is prone to bumbling. And it would remain to be seen which way would the, the process move this time.
I don't see any Indian response to this coup. Is this something deliberate? We are waiting for things to develop. Why the silence?
Well, I think it's been only 48 hours since the coup. Uh, and we do have a number of, how should I say, national interest driven issues with Sudan. It's we our commitment to democracy is fairly well known. Secondly, India has been among the top trading and economic partners of Sudan. Bilateral trade uh, is fairly significant at 1,300 crores in year 2020. Uh, the and the exports outweighed imports from Sudan by a margin of six. So about 1,000 uh, crore of exports and 200 odd crores of imports. Please remember that the oil exports from Sudan earlier are now credited to South Sudan.
South Sudan.
I should also add that there is considerable uh, indirect trade with Sudan through Gulf. Dubai, for example, or Jeddah acts as an entry port for Indian goods going to Sudan. We also have about, I think, $700 million worth of credits to Sudan, mainly for power plant and other projects that we have implemented in that country. So there is a certain amount of exposure. The number of Indian companies working in Sudan is not small, particularly in pharmaceutical sector. So all that hinges on our national interest. And Sudan has had very cordial ties with us. Indians have not been, never been prosecuted or persecuted, I should say,
Yeah.
and they have good image, Indian sort of standards in Indian goods and Indian way of films and so on are quite popular. And we need to also be uh, conscious of the opportunities that Sudan may have in future for agriculture, for establishing joint projects in that country to service Indian economy, and so on. In Sudan, Sudanese are particularly interested in medical tourism, in studying in India, for higher courses, and so on. And we would be interested in preserving that kind of linkage.
So as it stands now, the coup is 48 hours old. Too early, really, to tell what direction General Burhan will take. There are reports of divisions within the army. We'll have to wait and see whether this goes off into something far more serious, more deeper, or there could be even bloodshed in the streets. So it's basically wait and watch. Ambassador Sachdev, pleasure talking to you, sir, and thank you for your insight.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
And for all of you out there who are tracking us, tracking these conversations, continue following us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow our website, keep coming to us with your comments and observations. Goodbye.